Hey everyone, this is Nick, and this video is a day early because on Saturday and Sunday I'll be at a Warhammer 2v2 tournament, meaning I will just not have time to finish this video on Saturday morning as I usually do. So you get it today instead. And we've got a nice lineup of stuff to talk about. First, a new version of the kernel that has some big performance boosts in some key areas of Linux. We also have the Steam Deck being fully sold out, but it's probably not because the Steam Deck 2 is coming soon. We also have Mint making big changes to how the distro will be released in the future, and we also have Discord facing a big amount of backlash, which maybe will favor some open source alternatives to it. Oh, and we also have this message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by SquareSpace. They are your all-in-one platform to create, publish, and manage your own website. They have really super easy tools to create your online presence, whether you know how to code or not. So they have what they call their blueprint system, which lets you pick from a variety of templates that are pre-built and will suit any type of website. Whether you're looking for a simple blog, an online store, a video platform, whatever. All these templates are also optimized to give you solid SEO, and they even have a bunch of SEO tools that you need to make sure that your website doesn't end up in the last page of Google search results. On top of that, to go further, Squarespace has their own design engine to create your own pages. You can just drag and drop elements where you want them, and you can change the colors, the fonts, and just tweak the template however you want, or you can automate all of this. And once you have something you like, you can add extra features like creating your own online shop with a payment system that handles credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, and more. You can even design your own logo from Squarespace and book your own domain name. So check out squarespace.com/TheLinuxExperiment or just click the link in the description and you'll get 10% off your first website or domain purchase. So let's begin with Linux Mint. They published a lengthy blog post with plenty of updates for the project. They first talked about their support for keyboard layouts and input methods. Apparently, some users use keyboard layouts that do not match their physical keyboards when they use specific input methods. And Mint didn't really plan for that initially, but they do want to support it as well. The issue is that currently you only set the keyboard type, which gives Mint the indication of where and what your actual physical keys are. But then you don't get the extra step of saying, no matter which physical keys I have and what they say they are, use this specific layout instead for this input method, which some users are missing. Mint also lamented the fact that user administration and account details are currently handled by desktop environments instead of being handled by distros themselves. They said that user management can't be properly handled by desktops, and those tools aren't properly maintained on a lot of systems. I would assume they are talking about the tools that you can find in the Mate version, for example, of Mint, or maybe an XFCE version. Mint will then add user management to their system administration tool instead, the one that they added in Mint 22.3, so any variant of Mint that you use should have the same feature set when it comes to managing users. Mint is also working on a screensaver that supports Wayland and X11 that would replace the current one, and it will be rendered using Cinnamon's window manager / Wayland compositor. This is apparently the final missing piece when it comes to Cinnamon's Wayland support, which I would say is not a very important piece, but some people still use those screensavers, so you might as well make them work. Now finally, and more importantly, Mint is looking at changing their release cycle, potentially lengthening the release and development cycle of the distro. They say that they do like doing things incrementally and changing things more slowly over time compared to making massive releases every 1 or 2 years that change a lot of stuff. But they say that maintaining all of these small intermediary releases is generally, I think it's 2 or 3 per year. That takes a lot of time. With a release every 6 months, plus creating LMDE as well, they say they spend more time testing stuff, fixing stuff, and releasing new versions than actually developing the stuff that they want to ship. So they're thinking of changing this and adopting a longer development cycle, meaning maybe just 1 version per year instead of 2. They will give more info in the future. I think the perfect release schedule for Mint, since it is based on Ubuntu LTS, would be the same as Elementary OS, meaning you just release updates to the Cinnamon desktop when they're ready, and you make major ISO versions, maybe once a year, that include all the changes so users don't have to download a year's worth of updates every time they reinstall Mint. And you could just provide the usual Ubuntu package updates and your desktop environment and app updates when they're ready, just as a rolling cycle. I don't see Mint doing a one release every 2 years following the LTS release cycle, because I think that would be way too far away and they would lose that incremental change thing, instead making big sweeping changes every 2 years. I don't think that fits their philosophy, but we'll have to wait and see how they do it. Now, you might have seen that Discord is currently facing a lot of backlash. This all seems to stem from the fact that the UK and Australia implemented laws that mandate a lot of social platforms and discussion platforms to verify the age of their users. Now, apparently Discord went over what was required and decided to implement that to most, if not all, countries in the world, presumably to make sure that people using VPNs in countries where it is actually mandatory to check for the age couldn't make it look like they were from another country. They would still be age verified. This age verification process is done either by scanning your face and taking basically a shot of your face to try and identify if you're of age, which isn't really reliable, because when I was 16, I looked like I was like 22, 25. No one ever asked me for my ID starting when I was 15 or 16, so yeah, that's not reliable at all. But also they can ask to scan an ID, just a government ID. This is not great. People are really mad about this. It seems to lead to a big search for Discord alternatives, which are not that easy to find. There are plenty of open source or non-open source alternatives to Discord, but none of them have the same level of ease of use, size of community, making sure people can actually get onto it, and actual features. It's not that easy. There's also some potential mass cancellations of paid subscriptions, because yes, Discord has a paid thing called Nitro. Discord says that their face scans and IDs are deleted after use, but in 2025, the company that they used to manage some ID stuff was breached, and 70,000 IDs leaked from that contractor, which seems to indicate that they do still store them somewhere, or at least they used to store those IDs somewhere, and this of course brings doubt to the entire process. Discord also said that they won't need to do age checks on a lot of users because they already have the information on those users thanks to machine learning, just reading through the conversations and trying to identify through your activity on Discord how old you are. And this is even worse for most users, because this means Discord uses a lot of the information you enter in the application or into your conversations, and they can actually access that and use that, and I don't think that was ever really made clear at all by Discord. Basically, it is a complete shit show. Now, on the one hand, Discord does have to comply with the laws that in the countries where they operate in. They can either choose to maybe fight that law, but it's just never gonna work. You're fighting a government. There's no chance you're actually winning this unless there's an actual big basis for that, which here I don't think there would be. You could also decide to stop operating in these countries, but Discord isn't necessarily making an enormous amount of money compared to companies with the same user bases, so I don't think they want to do that either. So they're complying with this, and they're sometimes maybe even going above what the law actually requires them to do. Plus, the ways they're implementing these checks is just iffy, doesn't really gel with people. You have that machine learning / AI system to identify your age plus scanning your ID, which means that nothing is private anymore. It just sucks, but honestly, if you ask me if I needed to move away from Discord, what would I use? I would be hard-pressed to give you a simple answer that would fit the bill for all the communities I'm in. The Linux kernel 6.19 was released this week. It comes with a lot of performance improvements. First, there are updates to the AMD GPU driver, which now includes GCN1 and GCN1.1 AMD GPUs. Those are way older cards, but moving to that driver and now having Vulkan support gives them 40% better performance and lets them use DXVK properly, meaning they can actually play games. Now, granted, they are old cards, they are not going to play the latest AAA titles, but they can still get access to those games. We also have some big performance improvements to ext4, the file system that is the default on a lot of distributions. It should have better performance up to 50% in best case scenarios. TCP performance has also been improved. You also have AMD Smart Data Cache Injection, which is a feature that lets I/O devices put some data in the L3 cache instead of putting it through the RAM, which should improve performance as well. There's also a security feature for Intel, which better separates the kernel and the user space. A new system call now lists namespaces more efficiently. Signals sent by processes can now be explored to see which signal caused which process to crash, which should help with debugging. There's also better read speeds for Fuse systems. BetterFS has a shutdown state where it can finish writing the currently queued operations and prevent new ones from happening before it actually shuts down. There's the slew of new hardware being supported as with every new kernel version. You also have more triggers available to security modules to make policy decisions. SE Linux is affected by this. There's better compressed RAM performance using ZRAM. The kernel can now be replaced without downtime thanks to a live update orchestrator, sort of similar to live patching your kernel, but here you're just hot swapping the current version for a new one. There's also support for PCIe link encryption and device authentication, and also a new console font for easier terminal reading on screens that just don't have big resolutions. Very, very sizable update with performance boosts from older AMD cards, newer AMD cards, ext4 file systems, networking, compressed RAM, and also I/O devices on AMD. Really, really solid update. Now, as always, you'll have to wait for your distro to give you that update or not give it to you, and you'll see if you get those benefits or not. Speaking of the Linux kernel, there's a proposal to add machine learning to Linux specifically. The proposal would add a machine learning proxy to the kernel, which then would export some data from the kernel subsystems, like performance metrics, statuses of various systems, and other things. It would export all this data to a user space machine learning model, which would then emit recommendations to the machine learning proxy, and then the kernel could decide if they want to implement those recommendations or not. All the training, the execution, and the experimentation would be purely done in user space, so the kernel stays in full control. This isn't AI in the kernel, it's more of a local machine learning system running and giving recommendations to the kernel based on the kernel subsystem's data. The kernel gets to decide what happens, it could evaluate the recommendations and decide to apply them or not. Although I don't know on which basis it would make that decision. The applied changes would probably also be fed back into the machine learning system as well to see how things are running and to learn from that. The patches submitted are purely experimental. They are made for feedback purposes. It's what they call a request for comment, so it's not at all being planned for integration right now. Now, currently, a bunch of the answers on the Linux kernel mailing list seem to boil down to why would you need to add a machine learning proxy to the kernel? We already have plenty of systems and APIs and calls that you can make to talk to the Linux kernel from user space and get that data. You don't need to implement something specifically in the kernel. You can just have the machine learning thing running in user space and then using the APIs to decide if you want to actually influence what the kernel does or not, which I would agree with. Also, there's always that machine learning equals AI, which is not necessarily true in all cases. This isn't necessarily a large language model, but yeah, we'll have to see where this goes. Currently, no one is really proposing this to be included right now. It's more of an exploration of what could be done, which, hey, as long as it isn't forced onto anyone, I'm fine with looking at what it can do. Now, Ubuntu will apparently drop its venerable software and updates tool from the default install. This thing handles all the repos that you have on Ubuntu graphically, letting you enable or disable repos with a click, adding new repos, and sort of that stuff. Ubuntu seems to think it's too dangerous to let users do that because users could disable all the base repos of Ubuntu and be left without security updates. There's still a command line utility that will remain to handle all of that, of course. The graphical tool in Ubuntu 26.04 will still be in the repo, so you can install it. It's called Software Properties GTK, but it's not certain if this will keep being maintained and will still exist in the repos as time goes on. And I think this is a solution that is a bit too radical. If you don't want users to disable the official Ubuntu repos, just remove that option in the tool. Don't just remove the entire tool. Giving a graphical option to add PPAs and repos is important to Debian-based repositories for users to be able to do it. Sure, you can let them break the system, but that's also true when they install spyware snaps from the Snap Store, fake crypto wallets, or when they install deb packages that they downloaded from any website and force the install of that. This is all true, so if you want to remove the graphical management of repos, you also have to remove a lot of other things that Ubuntu currently lets you do, even graphically. I think a softer, nicer solution would just have been that when a user wants to disable a repo that is a core Ubuntu repo, you display a warning saying, hey, this is super important. Do you really want to disable that? Because no updates, no app updates, nothing. Are you sure? Or maybe just remove that page and don't let users disable that graphically. That also works. Removing the entire tool though, I don't think it's clever. Now, KDE Linux, the official KDE distribution, now has a beta. As a reminder, this is the showcase distribution for KDE. It provides an immutable base based on Arch, but it is a system image, so it's not really Arch at all. It also provides the latest KDE stuff, and of course, plenty of various workarounds to get stuff done on that immutable base. Snap has been removed from the distro in the beta. They decided to go all in with Flatpak instead. Now, KDE says that snaps work better than Flatpak in a lot of ways, but for their base, which is Arch, although very heavily tweaked, the only way to get snap support is through the AUR, and they don't want to have anything from the AUR in the system image. I would assume because it is mostly user package software, thus considered maybe not trustworthy or stable enough in theory for their immutable needs. Their goal is in fact to not use the AUR at all in building the system image if they can. KDE Linux also no longer suggests using Homebrew because apparently it caused issues by overriding system libraries. This caused crashes and also in some cases prevented booting even when resuming from a previous system image because of course the libraries you installed that overrode everything are in your user directory, and so that's just going to override everything no matter the version of the system image you use. KDE Linux also added a bunch of default KDE applications and command line tools. They also improved performance, they made sure the boot process is smoother and quieter by not always showing the OS image selector. They also improved hardware support, notably for keyboards, mice, drawing tablets, smart cards, virtual cameras, USB Wi-Fi dongles, and more. That's pretty good progress here. Now, I do wonder how a distro that only uses distro containers and Flatpaks can really work as a showcase for KDE. We'll have to see how this goes. Personally, I still find that a little bit too limiting for my taste. I do enjoy distro containers, but I think they're a very convoluted solution to replicate the features that you just have on a basic distro. It's surely more stable and secure, but also it's a lot of work and extra space to use to just install a command line utility, which it's not my jam. I am still very interested in KDE Linux because I do think that all Linux desktops should have their flagship distro, their own stuff where they control the entire experience and you can use the software they provide exactly as they intended it, with their defaults, their vision of how it should run, because that gives you a nice comparison point compared to other distros. Instead of saying, oh, KDE is super buggy, you can say, well, KDE runs really well on KDE Linux, but it is super buggy on distro X, Y, or Z. It just promotes your desktop in the normal way you build it, instead of having all the bugs that distros could introduce attributed to your own stuff. Now, a new experimental protocol was merged to Wayland this week, called the Zones Protocol, or XX-Zones. This is meant to allow for multi-window applications on Wayland, letting them place these other windows where they want and set some form of Z coordinate so the window can always stay above others no matter what is currently in focus. So this new protocol creates zones, which is a coordinate system that exists for the application itself and is provided by the compositor. The client can only set window positions relative to the zone that was assigned to the app. Set zones can be pretty small and restrictive, or they can use up the entire monitor space. The compositor, as far as I understand, decides which size of zone the client gets, but I would assume the client gets to request a specific zone size, like for example, multi-monitor or single monitor or half a monitor or whatever else, or my window plus X% around it. In the end, what happens is you launch an app, it requests a zone to handle its multiple windows, the compositor gives it a zone based on the options or a policy that the developer set or that the user configured, and then the application can just spawn new windows, place them wherever they want relative to the zone the compositor gave it, and also make sure that these windows can stay always on top or always behind, so you have a nicer experience. I think it is pretty cool to see this happening. This has been a big pain point of Wayland for some applications. I know a bunch of scientific applications needed that kind of stuff and just didn't work well on Wayland because of that, because you could already spawn the multiple windows, but they would just keep overlapping with each other. They would just be spawned in the center of the screen or with your current window policy, so you would have to play some kind of Tetris game all the time to place the windows where you wanted it. It sucked, and this might fix that. Now, I've seen some comments saying that this is not a good implementation, that this will be very annoying to deal with for applications or for compositors, so we'll see how it goes, but at least you have an option to do it, which is better than not having support for that at all, I guess. It looks like the Steam Deck is out of stock in a lot of the world, including the US, Canada, and Asia. This includes the original LCD model that was already on notice as it was sold until stocks lasted, but also the OLED models, the 512 gigs and the 1 terabyte model. In the UK, they are apparently still all in stock, at least at the time I'm recording this, and in Europe, OLED models seem to still be available, again, at the time I'm recording this, but in the US, Asia, and Canada, nothing remains. Now, we can speculate on why that is, but my best guess would be that it's not the Steam Deck 2. There is no chance Valve would release that now, right after announcing 3 devices, and then delaying the reveal of the prices and release date of those devices. It's literally the worst time possible if you want to launch a new gaming product that needs RAM or VRAM or an SSD. All of that is just way too expensive and you cannot plan for the changes in prices. My best guess would be that Valve is either running out of stock and doesn't want to produce more right now because the cost would be way too high, and so they would have to sell the Steam Deck OLED at a higher price than it currently is, which would make no sense because it is a 2-year-old device that struggles to run the latest games. You can't really sell it at more than the 650 euros that the OLED model costs. The other reason might just be that Valve always had a stock that is being maintained at a very close to demand level, but at some point people said, hey, you know what, everything is increasing in price, so maybe it's time to buy a Steam Deck OLED right now. And so they did it, and they bought more than what Valve anticipated, which means stocks are now non-existent or very low, and they are struggling to rebuild new devices because the prices are insane. At any rate, probably not the Steam Deck 2. Can't wait for all of that garbage AI stuff to die down so we can actually keep having devices that don't cost an arm and a leg. And finally, as AI slop, bug reports, and AI submitted code invade open source projects, a new system is being proposed called Vouch. This is intended to help managers and maintainers of various code repos identify who they can trust to submit code based on an aggregated list of vouched users that projects can maintain and share with one another to see if a contributor is trusted elsewhere and thus accept their contributions then. It also allows for block lists to ban bad actors and make sure they can't submit anything and waste your time as a maintainer. There are also GitHub scripts that let you auto-close pull requests made from unvouched users. The project said that being vouched for in this system doesn't really have to be very difficult. Each project can decide what is enough. For example, if you're a simple project and you're not getting a ton of time wasters, you could just vouch for a user and add them to the list. If they introduce themselves as a human being, you ask them 2 questions that a chatbot struggles with, they answer and you say, okay, you're a human, let's go, you can start submitting stuff. Or you could have much more stringent procedures to verify that the person is a human being, of goodwill, doesn't use AI. Each project can decide what they want to do. Only people with right access to a repo can vouch for users. Once you're vouched for, it doesn't mean you can do anything you want in the repo either. And of course, this kind of looks like how things are run right now, except you can automate things and maintain a list that projects can aggregate and share, meaning you can make verification of users and potential contributors very easy across all open source projects. Now, this is meant to prevent what they call drive-by contribution, so someone just pops up, submits some AI-generated code, or just code in general, and then disappears. They don't answer questions, and if you include their code in the codebase because you had no questions, they are never going to come back again to fix, maintain, or do anything. You don't really want that in a project, so this prevents that, but it also will allow blocking bots that spam projects with AI bug reports that just waste people time, or just AI-generated code that doesn't work well, doesn't follow the structure of what you want to do. This just makes maintainers waste less time, because you could say, hey, this bigger project, they probably are getting a lot of slop submitted. They must have a solid vouch list. I'll take a look at it and I'll aggregate it with my own. So new contributors, if they come around, they're humans, they're friendly, they were already vouched for that project. So they can contribute to mine immediately. But the ones that this big project blocked, they also blocked on my project. So they can't waste my time. Of course, the end result might just be that you're going to have tons of interactions proposed to you of people either being real humans or masquerading as real humans, saying, hey, I'm a human, I want to contribute, can you vouch for me so I can submit some stuff? And maybe instead of wasting time looking at the code, you're wasting time at looking at people introducing themselves. Who knows? Depends on how you set up your process to vouch for someone. Still, I think it's an interesting one. We should take a look at it and see if maybe it helps or maybe actually doesn't. What will definitely help if you want to move to Linux is a computer from our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. You all know about Tuxedo by now. They make laptops and desktops that ship with Linux out of the box. The reason why you should really take a look at what they have to offer is first, they have a pretty big range from small form factor laptops all the way up to big workstations and big gaming laptops. They have it all, a bunch of hardware choices for each device, plus also a bunch of keyboard layouts you can pick from on your laptop, your own logo you can have engraved on the lid, or no branding at all if you prefer that. It's pretty cool. But also, they do contribute back to Linux. All the drivers that they developed, all the things that they build to handle the various little hardware features that those laptops or desktops comes with, they upstream those to the Linux kernel, or at least they push to upstream those when those changes are accepted. I only use Tuxedo Computers these days. I just really enjoy the experience they offer. You just buy them and you know Linux is gonna run on them, and that's pretty nice as an advantage. So as always, you can go check them out in the link in the description below. Anyway, this will conclude today's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. As always, thank you all for the support. You know where all the YouTube buttons are, where you should click them. Please do so, leave a comment, whatever else. It always helps push the channel forward. If you want to support the show and the channel, plenty of links down in the description, including Patreon pages and YouTube memberships that will give you a daily version of this news show. And of course, you can also just not do any of that and keep watching the videos. That works too. Thank you all, and I guess you'll see me in the next one, probably on Saturday this time instead of being one day early. Bye!